It's time for Tech Talk with Mathew Dickerson. I'm your host, Tony Graham. Hello, Matthew.
Good afternoon, Tony. Good to be chatting technology again.
Always. And one of my favourite subjects is up first. That's solar efficiency. Now, there's a mob down there in Wollongong. It's a startup, and they've worked out a way to replace silver with copper in its new venture in solar cells. Now, this is an area where they've been working on for some time. Of course, copper makes a world of difference, doesn't it?
It does. Silver is obviously expensive to mine, and the environmental impact of mining silver is significant in terms of being able to produce solar panels. So if you can replace silver with copper, you're making a dramatic change to solar panels. And they've been able to do it in the past, but the efficiency hasn't been that great. But this startup down in Wollongong is obviously all about making it more efficient and being able to use copper rather than silver. When you think about silver, 15% of the total industrial consumption of silver across the world goes into making solar panels. So it is quite a significant component of it. But again, if we can get copper in there, there's a few things that I'm a bit excited about this, Tony. One, making the cells more efficient, that's great. Two, using copper instead of silver. But the thing that probably gets me most excited about it is this might actually generate a manufacturing component in this nation. Now, we're the number one connector of solar panels on rooftops in the entire world per capita. So we are fantastic at putting solar panels on our roof. We've got lots of sun, but we buy all those solar panels typically from China. So if we could start to get to the point where we're manufacturing those in this nation, I think that's a really exciting development. And then maybe get to that next stage where we not only develop them and manufacture them here, but actually start exporting them.
Yeah, look, my only concern with this is that one of the investment partners is one of the biggest solar panel manufacturers in China. I don't know how that's going to pan out, but let's hope it all works out and we get some Australian production happening with that.
Yeah, that's right. And I think there's probably some recognition there that we are quite innovative and creative in what we do manufacture in this nation. So having a Chinese investor on board makes sense because they probably see the innovation that we have in this nation.
Well, for our next topic, Matthew, I'll try and hold you down to about 2.5 minutes on this because it's back to the gaming thing. Now, you tell me what's inside the ambitious plan to build a Minecraft version of Australia? Because that's going to be quite popular, I think.
It is, and it's actually an ambitious plan to build a Minecraft version of the world. But certainly in Australia, there's some people working countless hours on designing and erecting Australian buildings, and one of the ones they've just completed is the Opera House. Now, for those not familiar with Minecraft, basically it's an online game where you're using Lego-like components to build something. So you can imagine building something like the Opera House, where it's all curved surfaces, out of Lego blocks is quite difficult. So there's people out there spending all this time. They're not necessarily architects, they're not engineers, they're people that just have a love for gaming. Some of them are architects and engineers, but they're spending all this time on building virtual versions in Minecraft of all these things that are familiar. So we've got the Opera House being built, we've got people building things like downtown Sydney, the Harbour Bridge, for example, Centrepoint Tower, but you want people from around the world to be able to experience what it's like coming along and going through the streets of Sydney. So there's people working away on that. In fact, there are teams across the world, and the second largest team in the world is here in Australia trying to build, Australian landmarks, pieces of Australia so people can visit it. But the big plan, the big picture, is to have it to the point where you can go anywhere in the world and visit it while you're playing in the Minecraft game. And you might say, well, you can just go to Google Earth and look at those things, and I agree, there are components of that. But being able to do it inside a game, I think there's a bit of excitement for that. And I think people will actually see parts of the world they wouldn't normally have seen through something like Minecraft.
Well,
how'd I go? Did I keep it under 2 or 3 minutes?
Well, yeah, I think you did pretty well, Matthew.
Hey, good.
Now, the University of Queensland has partnered with Gilmore. I take it that's an engineering company, and it's there to boost the Australian space industry. That's an exciting development.
Well, even saying the word or the term Australian space industry sounds a bit funny because we don't really have much of a space industry, although that's not quite correct. We do have some components that we build and are launched by other providers around the world. But this is pretty exciting to get to the point where we actually do have our own rockets launching devices into space. And we're the last of the OECD nations to actually have our own space industry. Again, we've been relying on other companies so far, but it's pretty exciting. And I think one of the first instances we'll see of this being used will be in developing some better satellite devices for internet reception in this nation. We have a huge nation with not a lot of population. So there are people, very unfortunately for them, who rely on satellite reception. And at the moment, they're typically geostationary satellites. So they sit at 36,786 kilometres above the Earth. At that far above the Earth, we have this huge latency, so it becomes very frustrating using satellite reception for internet. But there is a system known as low Earth orbit satellites. So they sit maybe 500 to 800 kilometres above the Earth. But the problem is you can't just have one sitting above the nation of Australia, because at that height, they're spinning around the Earth at, multiple times per day. So you need typically anywhere from, say, 30 to 52 satellites to cover Australia while you have those low Earth orbit satellites. So you need an efficient way to get them up there. And this is one of the first challenges I think we'll see addressed by our own space agency: launch some of those satellites, launch them low Earth orbit, and give better internet reception to people across this great nation where they haven't got easy access to a major population, where you've got basically fibre optic or fibre to the node.
So you reckon they're going to beat Elon Musk with that?
I think there'll be alternative providers, and I think Elon Musk, he's talked about his plan as well to do exactly that. Again, when you're relying on another company somewhere else in the world, then you're really taking whatever price that you can get from them, and you haven't got a lot of say in it. If you build your own, you've got a bit more say in what happens there. So I think the idea is that we could actually have something again with our innovation where we're launching it and being able to be used across the world, but more importantly, give some reasonable internet access to people across this nation.
Yeah. Now, I should mention that Gilmore is a Gold Coast-based company called Gilmore Space Company that was founded in 2013. So a collaboration between two Australian entities. It's great, isn't it?
That'd be fantastic. And I think once we get to the point where we're launching our own satellites, there'll be more companies in Australia who will want to put niche devices into space. And I think it's actually a lot easier and cheaper to do that than most people would think. But if we've got our own rockets launching here, I think that'll make it even better, and there'll be more innovation in this nation.
Yeah, fantastic. Now, you've been listening to Tech Talk with Mathew Dickerson on Binjang 91.5. I'm your host, Tony Graham. Stay tuned next week, same times, that is 3:40 p.m. in the afternoon or 10:40 a.m. in the morning for the next editions. And it's back to the great music and community information on Binjang.
See you next week, Tony.
See you next week.